Yeah, for this we should probably be quick about the questions since it
Yes.
is in a spoken context, so usually to some extent not as much clarific like as much as precision as you would with writing. So
Does it become so I get what he's doing here and I'm very interested in it, but does it become obvious as I read through it in such a way that I can turn it into like a written framework? So like, what I'm thinking is right now it's a bit all over the place. There's so much text, there's so much explanation, and I can see like you have to make a concept part of you by having like concretes and all that, but you don't know how many concretes, you don't know how many examples you need, you don't know when you need to do it. And like, does it become more obvious for me? I'm just trying to think of a good approach on a good way to approach it because I'm wondering how does it, yeah, can I turn it into like a method where I have a framework and like every new idea I learn, I'm like, all right, let me now think of specific examples. Let me do this, let me do that. And then I can really integrate it or,
yeah, I think one chapter mentions like 6 things and numbers them,
okay,
and those
cool.
would be general things you would do for your thinking.
Okay. And then I'm just practicing that. Like once I get to that section, I can just, whatever I'm studying, I can just apply it to. Is that
Pretty much, I think so.
okay?
And you could learn other
Um,
techniques in the future, but these are what peak off things are the essential things.
okay. And the anti-philosophic man, I thought Kafka would be a good example. Anxious People by Frederick Blackman. Can you think of anything else that might be cool?
Anti-philosophic.
Yeah, well, he talks about that. No, he says the man in the street, he cannot fathom what is going on. And if he is decent to that very extent, he can make no sense of the injustice he sees. He's not even sure they are injustices or what injustice is. He doesn't know. He has no answers. He doesn't have clear
Yeah, I
questions. He
wouldn't
has no.
say it's even like not even like Kafka would still be philosophical. Anti-philosophic to me is like you're just see a guy in the street. It's like he's walking to work. He's like what do I care about the meaning of life? It's just I just want to get to work and get home tonight and watch a football game or soccer game. Like he doesn't really think about beyond that, and that's just what it means. I think just they don't go beyond just their day to day.
But that's what I'm looking for. So not the anti. That's the anti-philosophic argument. Says this
Yeah,
man lives a life of luxury, the
yeah,
blissfully free of philosophy. So wondering what
yeah.
it looks like, and then I thought of like some books might be, I don't know, I just made that up. Anxious People by Frederick Blackman. But
Oh, I see what you mean.
can
I
you
see what
think
you
of any
mean.
other books where someone's like blissfully
Anti-philosophic,
free of philosophy and what that looks like?
blissfully free.
Yeah.
Um, like I mean, I just trying to picture like I don't know, maybe Henry VIII. Like, he doesn't really care about his morals. He just wants to live whatever hedonistic life he wants, marries whoever he wants. He wants to get divorced. He doesn't really care. He doesn't really see the consequences, the moral consequence of what he does. It's just he does what he feels is right. It's not thinking in terms of philosophy. Just whatever
Yeah.
strikes him as pleasurable or nice.
Okay. Um, all right, we'll skip it. I wrote that down, but maybe there's I can find something that's like someone who's blissfully free of any philosophy.
Yeah.
So this thing about this is really cool. I love this part where he's talking about the truck on the perceptual level. Like you're not gonna. It's immediate. It's concrete. You're gonna jump out of the way, but it doesn't happen on the conceptual level. Like, and I get that. That makes sense, and I think I love this part. But what are some examples of like something that you can't see literally in front of you and that kills you? That it, like is a good example of like philosophy misunderstood that has led to personal death or something.
Um, I think it's more like the how far off the death is. Like, if you don't eat well, that can cause you to die like in 10 years or
Right.
30 years, but sooner than you would. It's more like how immediate is it? The longer range it is, the more abstract you need to be. So of
Yeah.
course, if you're trying to think the span of your entire life, of course you need concepts to be able to hold that in your mind. You wouldn't need concepts you're just dealing with avoiding lions in the jungle. Like you wouldn't really need concepts as much. Like you can plan ahead a little bit, like don't go into their den or something, but you wouldn't need to plan ahead like, oh, you have to build a house and plan for your retirement. things like that, of course, because you don't need to think long range there. Long range thinking is where you need concepts.
Okay. So it's just the range of the time away that the consequence is that determines whether or not it's
Yeah, that's how I think of it. Because I mean, if your philosophy could kill you, quote unquote, in the sense that it brings you the wrong information, you don't deal with the reality appropriately. It's a gradual, you're going towards death. It doesn't mean you're immediately there as much as certain things get you there sooner.
Yeah.
But obviously, like stabbing yourself with a knife would get you there right away, but bad eating habits might take many decades.
Yeah. This resonated with me. Like, the best books fade away in your mind. That's my experience for like actually most stuff I read, even if I understand it. It becomes merely the memory of somebody else's words, and so on. I wonder if have you managed to apply this method to other things you read? So like taking an abstraction and then coming up with concretes and that kind of thing.
I think so. I'm I'm not really good at remembering what I read. Like I can't quote things very well. I'm bad at quoting. Like I've seen people like on TV and like TV shows, like a character quote something like every 5 minutes. Is like I can't do that. I barely know any quotes, but I can. It's like it fades away, but I understand what they say. Like I can talk about anything Rand wrote really easily. I don't remember a lot of what she wrote specifically word for word.
Yeah.
Like when I reread it, it's like, oh yeah, I do understand it. But if I try to tell you now, what did Rand say in this chapter one of Ito? Like I have no idea. I have the gist of it. I have it in my mind, I have my understanding, but I rely on my just understanding to repeat what I understand, not just like, oh, Rand said this on this page. It's not in my mind at all,
Okay.
but it's faded away. But I've integrated the concepts in a way that I don't need to know exactly what she said, that I can recreate what she's her thinking in a sense.
But then outside of Rand, have you, because there's two aspects of this memorizing is like, obviously you're talking about people who are recalling quotes. I haven't done that either, but I also haven't necessarily read a book and fully integrated it in such a way that I could then like I've read books that I've liked and I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. And then, a year later I'll forget it. It's not integrated either. Neither is it memorized in the sense that I can quote. So have you had the experience? So you've managed to integrate Rand, but you can't memorize specific quotes. But what about like other conceptual books? Have you
I
managed
have.
to, yeah, done that? And did you apply these methods in this from this lecture series?
It's hard to say. If I thought about it, probably. Yeah, I do come up with examples, concrete examples, try to validate it and things like that.
Yeah.
And I have done it with some psychology books. I mean, I might remember like two or three chapters and most of it I forget, but in a way it's like I kind of let slide what seems to have a lot of questions to it or has a lot to integrate still. I can remember portions and integrate what I can. And I do forget a lot of the details, but I usually come away with a lesson that I can keep in my head. I tried sometimes to write down at least one or two things after read a book, or ideally that's what you want to do, like two or three facts that I really learned from the book that I want to remember and write it down. And going from there, usually I can get a good handle on what I want to remember.
Okay.
I could just write a couple notes. That's my strategy usually. But a lot of that is like I've studied that way my life. So it's kind of hard to say how to make that work other than like I've just gotten used to it over time.
Yeah.
But I do know that I try not to focus on all the information. Just I take one or two things and keep that. Like if I forget everything, I let that be. But it's like there's one or two things I don't want to forget. Like one lesson, one essential of the book that I got.
Got it. Um, Yeah, I guess that makes a case for approaching books intelligently and not reading front to back, because then if you're only
Mhm.
taking one or two things that are relevant to you, you can go through
Yeah,
40 books rather than one for like the same
mhm.
amount of time.
And I would say any book is written with like one sentence thesis in mind. So if you can remember it in one sentence, if you want to recall it, all you have to do is break it down again. It makes it easier to recall.
Every book is written with a thesis in mind, did you say?
Yeah, any nonfiction book anyway.
Oh,
Like that's usually how they'll be published. Like you need to give them like this is like the one sentence idea of what I'm writing, and then they'll get the manuscript and outline all that stuff.
oh
But
okay.
any book would be able to do that where you can condense into like one sentence.
Got it. And how about applying this to fiction? Like, if fiction is there to embody abstractions, and then you completely forget. Like, I've read The Fountainhead many times, and I still remember some of it, but I forget a lot of it after I don't read it for a while. And then
Yeah.
I wonder if you there are certain scenes or things you forget in a book. It means whatever. If they do embody some abstraction, it's you forget it because you don't know the abstraction. Does that make? Do you think that's
Mm,
uh, a logical thing to say?
no, I don't think you really need to know the abstraction even. It just
Yeah.
gives you
Okay.
the materials there to think of. With fiction, I don't worry about it much. I just let it be like an experience. I don't try to worry about remembering it too much. If
Yeah.
I do want to remember for some reason, I would treat it like the nonfiction. I just think of like one essential thing and one or two
Yeah.
things about the character and just keep that in mind. Like
I
usually I just
mean,
do that naturally when I read like, oh, this character does this and this is how I think of them. Each time I see that character, like, oh, is he a pessimist or is he an optimist? Usually I can think in terms like that.
yeah, I asked because I'm just relating it to the art theory, not so much. I get that you
Right.
read for experience, but the art theory is that the novel is there to embody abstract, like the characters embody abstractions and they help guide moral choice. You know, because the morals and principles are too abstract, so they embody them and help you keep them in mind. But if you just forget it anyway, then I don't see how that's true. So that's why I asked that question about like um, fiction.
Mm, I think it depends to what extent it's uh, like automatized, which I know it gets complicated there. Like how much of it really is there and retainable. But I think it seems to be when you read fiction, naturally some things will be remembered. It's closest to how memory might function most naturally, like your day to day.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really take some special technique to remember. Usually it'll
Mm.
just be stick in your mind. I mean, I don't know
Probably
why that is, and I can't give more principles behind it other than to say it's pretty good generally.
probably depends on your values at the time and like what
That
you've been
too.
thinking about.
Yeah. So be more like day to day situation, like what's something important do you think it's in? If you just recognize it as important and tell yourself in your head really quick, that's important. That sometimes that's enough to get it to stick.
Yeah.
Just identifying is it important, yes or no, and that's usually enough.
He says summarizing is not enough. Do you think I was thinking about that? I never summarize as is, but I was thinking like if I can summarize well, then I'm at least making one step forward, which is identifying the issue in essentials, right? Because one of my issues is I go off in all directions and I don't think I necessarily identify the big picture, if you want to put it in those terms. And so
Mm-hmm.
if I'm summarizing, even though it might not be an actual understanding according to what he's describing here, like at least it's a step towards some kind of understanding, right?
Yeah, I think so. You need to
It's
be able to summarize to be able to even expand beyond the mere recognition of a fact. Like you could say, of course, objectivism says that the purpose of life is, or the purpose of, well, it's ethical to follow your rational self-interest. You can just say that. Of course, you can summarize what it means. Well, what does it mean to like understand it, to truly know what it means to, or what it refers to in reality, and why it's true, or or whatever it might be. And the summary would only be to say what the facts are. I think more that you want to do more than summarize, because you want to be able to say it's true or false, or recognize something about it that you can validate it or not validate it, or um, you say something deeper than just describing it. You're saying like true, false, right, wrong, things like that.
You say something deeper than just understanding it. True, false, just right. I didn't quite follow that a bit.
Well, I mean, to summarize, I think it's just to describe something. And describing something
Would you
doesn't tell
say
you
describing in essentials?
not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
I mean, a summary should describe an essentials, but still, it's just a description. A description doesn't tell you whether it's true or false, and a description doesn't say if it's good or bad.
Yeah. Okay. Um, I think this one will be answered later in the book. So he's talking about someone who gave a summary, and then what's that? He's talking about someone who gave a summary, and she's like, he's talking about how do you get this whole fund of philosophy and hold that in mind while still working through each individual thing without like overflooding your mind and all this stuff like that. And I'm like, how do you even, this is just too, it's like overwhelmingly complicated to actually change your philosophy. Like if there's all these parts that are automated, I don't even, it's just, this is why I read this and I was like, oh my God, how do you even, this just seems too, like this like is an insane amount of work. You need to almost be full-time with a teacher full-time for years. Does he get into this later? I assume he does. Like, how do you apply this across the board? When do you go into detail? When do you not go into detail? Are there like principles for this that he comes up with, or it's more just specific examples?
Yeah, there are.
Oh,
like he's telling you, like he's agreeing with you, like, yeah, it seems overwhelming. It's like, how could you even handle this? I'm gonna go crazy. I'm gonna have to do this the rest of my life. I mean, he's really pointing that out. He's really pointing out how complicated, how difficult this is.
Yeah.
And the next chapters, he really gets into, like, how do you simplify this? How do you get a hold on all this? How do you trust that you're doing the right thing? How do you it at some level you do have to trust yourself, just that it will work out. It takes time. Do one thing at a time. It'll happen gradually. That you do have the ability on your own. Like you won't need a full-time teacher to do it, but guidance is good. But I think you can trust yourself that just naturally your day to day, it'll just start easing into your natural way of thinking.
Okay, so I'll look forward to going through there. I can see how this will be useful to read now as a supplement to everything else I read, if I can get some method out of it to apply.
Yeah, I think in chapter 3, I think he lists some things, or 2 or 3. Like I listed them to you once, but we'll go over them again. It's like about reduction, devil's advocate, knowing the conclusion you want to reach, things like that.
Yeah, okay. This is the same question as like, when do we get to the principles? I keep looking for the deductive style approach of everything, which is like what was in OPA, right? It's like it all begins logically and it seems like it's got like a deductive feel to it, but I guess it's not.
It's not as deductive as OPAR.
Yeah.
It won't give you that same feel.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole thing about, he's talking about mind-body dichotomy. I'm like, I'm confused how this affects my thought without me even knowing it. Actually, there's two things here. So he says one reason that people don't know the method of properly chewing an idea is that it's not taught. So that's one thing. Then there's the second reason that apparently there's some philosophical error that affects my thinking without even knowing about it. I'm like, how does that, the mind-body dichotomy, how does that happen? Like, what's an example of, I don't get how it just unknowingly changes my thoughts.
Mm, I think I need to see the next paragraph to really know. Or the
Okay.
next.
I get if you're not taught something, but I don't see how this is like thing in the background, that the mind-body dichotomy, that
Yeah, I would need to see the next paragraph to really know what
yeah.
it's talking about.
Well, I mean, here he's like, this is not the next paragraph, but he's just talking about how he made 28 different variants of the mind-body dichotomy: theory versus practice, love versus sex, the moral versus practical, pure science versus applied science, reason versus emotion, art versus business, and so on. And I'm like, that it's interesting that there's so many specific examples, but I'm trying to find out, how do I catch this stuff going on in my head? Like, if you're that concrete about it and you know exactly the ways they play out, you can catch it. But I'm just a bit like,
Yeah.
I'm interested and overwhelmed by like, well, how do you even catch this in your head?
Yeah, I mean, you see all those, like, well, just as a way to look at this, like, I see those distinctions he's making, but in my head, I'm not really trying to figure out how true each one is. I'm just understanding his point that he's making, that there are a variety of dichotomies that stem from the mind-body dichotomy. And what does he mean by mind-body dichotomy? I think it's just something that there's a division between the concrete and the abstract, and they're not necessarily connected. Like saying, oh, what's true concretely isn't really true in the abstract, or what's true in theory isn't true in practice,
Right.
that sort of thing. But the your abstractions should be connected in a real direct way, or not a direct way, but in a real legitimate way with the perceptual concrete level. Like some people might just treat like, oh, I can think about these philosophical questions, but they don't have any bearing on the physical world I lead. Or you could say like, oh, I like to study philosophy because it gets me away from the concrete world. But really, you couldn't really treat the world like that. Like there's not a separation between this mental world and the concrete world. They really should be connected. And he's saying that those sort of dichotomies result from that way of thinking. Like there's one
Right.
concrete, one
That's a,
abstract, and there's a barrier between the two, but rather they should be integrated.
yeah. He did speak in more detail later, even, and he went on to explain. So you gave the example of a separation between concepts and percepts, and then he talks about
Yes.
separation between emotion and thought and morality and practicality, and which I'll get into soon because it's. But I mean, I guess what I'm looking for is the kind, like what the errors look like in my own head, which you're not going to know, obviously, but because I'm curious, like, how does this thing um, if nothing comes to mind, then it's possible that I'm making errors on this basis without even realizing. I can see that, but I can't identify anything in my head and what these kind of like thinking patterns look like. So
Yeah, at that point, then it's like just keep reading is the best you can do. I mean, I think it's important to recognize that sometimes, like, I I do that a lot. That I might not get it first, so I just keep reading.
yeah,
Like I pause for a bit, but then I just keep going. And
okay,
if I really get confused again later, I will go back.
okay.
But it's
Well,
perfectly normal just to get like, that doesn't make sense. I don't see that's possible, and just wait till they flesh out their argument.
yeah, at least I have the questions which I can come back to like over
Right.
time, because otherwise you just forget it if you don't get it. But
Right.
all right, so this is more in detail. I'm just curious, like, so what I got from this is idealism is when you see morality as being more important than the practice, and you do see the dichotomy between them. But I'm curious about like how all this works. So like, can an idealist be a rationalist, or are they all repressors? So I tried to understand it. So I did a little table here. How do
Yeah.
I show you my table?
Oh, it looks pretty good. Morality practical.
Mind body split. So this is what I understood. These are like the three main ones from what I got. So the mind body split. And then if you're an idealist, you think morality is more important than practicality, but obviously there's a split between them. A pragmatist, practicality more important than morality. In terms of like your attitude towards your feelings, you repress if you're on the mind side, and if you're on the body side, you're an emotionalist. And then your attitude to thought is concepts are more important than facts. Makes sense with morality, more important than practicality. Thought. And if you're an empiricist. If you're on the body side, facts are more important than concepts. But what do you think of this diagram, first of all? Like,
Well,
on
I
this?
wouldn't say facts. I would say concretes, concepts over concretes, or
Oh,
concretes
okay.
over concepts. And of course, if
Okay.
you're integrated, it's like neither is more important than the other. They're just different things. Or
But
same
if you're
like
split,
if you're split, you would weigh one more than the other.
okay. And then does this, like, when you have this thing, can you be like, could I be, let's say, have some idealist patterns and then emotionalist patterns, or like, how does it?
Probably.
It's
I mean, it's not like a one thing. It's like you could be pretty integrated. Imagine you're integrated in everything except morality. Like it'd be more like morality is it practicality or is it the ideal? The idealist would say, well, the moral is only this ideal and it
I'm on
doesn't
this
matter what's
side.
practical. And that says the moral is what's practical, just what's practical. It's like consequentialism versus deontology. Do you know those terms?
No, I don't. I think I looked them up a while ago. I think consequentialist has something to do with like the ends justify the means, right? But then
Yes.
deontology, I don't know. Oh,
Okay,
deontology is
deontology.
duty. That's Kant, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Ah,
Deontology is
wow,
Kant.
wow.
Like he's
Um,
the textbook example of a deontologist.
so if I look at myself, I'm probably, I don't know actually. I think I'm mixed. Like I'm a bit of a pragmatist, but then I think I'm also a rationalist. So how does that work? How can you be on both sides? It's not like a clean thing where you're like, you
I
can be
mean,
split across the board, right? But how does it,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
well, you think concepts are real and concretes are real. It's just like how much are on one side than the other. I mean, there is a split. It shouldn't be split, but to the extent that there is one, it's just heavier on one side than the other. I mean, you're not saying denying one or the other. You're never on one. You're never integrated. Is kind of what, or you're not integrated to an extent. You could be both. It's not like I'm on the mind side or I'm on the body side. I
yeah,
mean, you could be more one than the other, but it's not like you're exclusively one or the other. Like you
right.
could have some combination of these things.
Um, Maybe you'd need, I was just curious about the relationship between them because I do get that if you're an idealist and you think morality takes precedence over practicality, then you're likely to have to repress. Like that makes sense to me. Um, but then, so I see some like relationship between some of these, but then it becomes a bit murkier and unclear when you're like, can you have, can you be to the extent that you're pragmatic? Are you going to be in terms of thought? Are you going to be a rationalist? Like, does that make sense? I don't know, but I guess you probably need like a real good understanding of what it actually looks like inside, like with all these examples that he's got here. Like you need real concrete examples to be able to make sense of that, I think. Because this
Yeah,
is one of those big uh, rationalist overviews of the whole thing, which which might
yeah.
not cap. Yeah.
I think a lot of it depends on your knowledge of philosophers. Usually, I could easily give a philosopher for each one of those that you gave and
Oh,
where they
really?
tend towards. Yeah,
For what? For these things?
no, below the your chart that you made.
Ah, can
I
you
could
give
give
me?
some.
That's cool. Can we do that for a
Sure.
bit?
Yeah, we'll do
Let
that.
me zoom in. Wait. Okay. Yes. Let's do it.
Okay, do you want to go through each of these, the mind and bodies, or do you want to go each little category?
Let's just do everything. I'm interested. That sounds cool.
Okay, well, let's start with Plato. Where do you think Plato would go?
Well, he's definitely an idealist,
Yeah,
and then, but I don't know if there's any clarity around
it's
feelings.
hard to say. With Plato, I would just put him like almost at the top because he's like the arch idealist, and Aristotle is generally
And
on the other side.
we don't know where he is going to be like in these ones, right? Is his attitude to feelings and thoughts.
It's
That's
hard to say.
yeah.
Some philosophers like probably get one or the other. For these Plato and Aristotle, usually they're more on one side or the other. Like Aristotle more body side.
Okay.
I mean, Aristotle still believes in God and some divine things, so he's a little bit with mind, but mostly the body side.
Okay.
Not like they're not the strongest on either one, but Plato mind, Aristotle body. Socrates definitely more body in the way he's really about the facts and things that are the concretes and what can contradict is like, how can you be sure? All I know is I don't know. Like that's more of a on the body side because you're focusing with the
Empiricist, right?
concretes. Yeah, you're skeptical of concepts.
And then what
So
about his
those are
feelings?
feelings. Let's go with Epicurus, emotionalist. Just like simple life feels good. Simplicity. Forget the concepts. Just feels nice.
And then what was
So
the
like,
term for that? Where you like, there's Apollos or Dionysus or something. There's like the two of them. I don't know what they're called,
yeah,
but
that's what Nietzsche made that distinction.
uh,
A Dionysus, like the god of beer and drinking and grapes and partying.
so is Epicurus like the Dionysus?
Yes,
Okay, cool.
like just have a nice time. Don't worry too much. Focus on the now. Don't worry about the future.
And could you? I'm curious though. If you read Socrates, can you figure out his attitude to feelings? For example, like would he be an emotionalist? Because it seems like if you're, I don't know. It's weird to think
It's
like,
hard to
okay,
say. I
yeah,
haven't read enough of him.
okay.
I haven't read enough of Plato about him. Let's think of somebody else. Let's say John Locke. He's an empiricist. As
So that's in his thought, right? That's his thought.
yeah, but it's also a lot of approach to many things. Like, well, you start with the evidence, what you see, your senses.
But isn't
Hume would,
wait, but with John Locke, okay, so he's an empiricist, concretes over facts, but what does that say about his feelings?
feelings. That one's harder.
Okay. But he's more likely, based on this tree that I've got here, with this kind of rationalistic overview, he's more likely to be whatever an emotionalist is, right? That's the idea of this whole thing.
Yeah, generally. But I
Okay.
mean, there's chances that he could repress in some ways, like denying emotions really matter. Like we got to ignore our emotions because they deceive us or something. I mean,
Yeah.
an empiricist could be that too, but you get the idea. You can be a little more on one side, but have characteristics of the other.
Yeah.
Or like Hume is definitely the body side in terms of concretes over concepts, skepticism, things like that.
Cool.
So we got Hume, Kant, as we said, definitely mind, definitely more towards repression about like, but again, he also wrote a book about like what reason can't do. So he's about like, oh, there's limits of reason and whatnot, but he's definitely on the mind side.
I guess,
Um,
now that I think about it, to interject, I remember there was a part in Opa where it was talking about you can't consistently practice a bad idea or something. He was talking about like an aesthetic who's trying to not completely disregard his body. It's impossible. So I guess there's no one who's like, there's no perfect kind
yeah,
of, it's funny. Maybe this is a clue for my thinking. There's no like perfect split. It's more like how, to what extent are your beliefs on one side or the other? Maybe that's what it is. Thoughts on that?
mm-hmm. Yeah, let's think of well, there's Saint Augustine,
Nietzsche. Oh yeah, Saint Augustine.
definitely the mind side.
Yeah.
Like he's like the body's evil, it's bad, blah blah blah. Even thinking could be evil because you're too much concerned with your body. Like thinking is even a body kind of thing. Even he recognizes that. So he's almost more extreme than Kant could ever be.
Cool.
Like he's really on that mind side. Like
Give him here plus plus on the mind side.
yeah, I think it's say Saint Thomas Aquinas, maybe kind of in the middle, but more body side. Well, slightly more body. But let's just say he's in the middle because he's very religious. He's a saint after all, but empirical thinking is important to some extent, unusually compared to other scholastics of his time. Like he's wrote a lot about Aristotle and he loved Aristotle, but he's really in Catholic dogma. Like he's always talking about like how do you think about God, what relationships God have with reason, things like that. So he's almost right in the middle. Like he uses all that good stuff about Aristotle, but also some questionable things that about like divinity and the unknowable and what stuff like that. And Rand speaks well of him too. Like he has good things to say about concepts, I think, or at least towards the good side. Like Thomism was the a way of thinking about concepts, and
Yep.
it's similar to what Rand thinks, and so she can appreciate him. Um, Descartes would definitely be mind because he's like, I can't be certain of anything except that I'm thinking. Really, just got there through deduction. Like it wasn't like, oh, I see the evidence says that I might be tricked by some demon. It was like, no, I'll never know. How could I really be sure I'm not being tricked by a demon that's trying to play tricks with my head?
Okay.
And then he builds up anything from there. Like, since I am certain that I am thinking that I am because I think, like, I know that I exist. And from there, I can see what's true. But it's not about what you see or evidence or anything. It's just like this undeniable fact retained through reason. So he's Descartes there for sure. Let's do a few more modern ones. Well, Nietzsche, definitely body side. More on the body side, anyway. Let's see. Let's take Bertrand Russell. I mean, I don't know if you know much about him, but
Don't
you
know
can look
anything
him up.
about.
Just pretty. Like, he was big on math and things like that. Like he's mostly mostly mind. Not completely. I can think of ways he's not, but mostly body or mostly mind. Sorry. Wittgenstein, more about the. No, he's too problematic. He's too weird. I don't know how to put him on there. But these are generally, these people fit pretty well where they go.
Can you do it with? So these are philosophers, and I guess to the extent that you accept their views, you're going to be similar to them. But can you think of any actual people or characters in books
In
that are like,
books.
yeah,
I'm trying to think at least one example from Rand, like, well, Tui. He would be more body, I think, because he's more about like the practicality, isn't he? He's
I
not
don't
big on
know.
like, I don't remember.
Isn't
I
that
think he's more
Keating?
body.
Keating
Keating,
is more body. Like Tui's
okay.
very conceptual, isn't he? Like the way
Okay.
he thinks about things. Like
It's been a
if
long
he's
time.
told, yeah,
Yeah, Tui might be on the left side, the mind side. Keating would be more the right side, the practicality, like emotionalist, like what feels right, being skeptical. people. Where would you put Musashi?
Where would I put him? I just finished the book, by the way. It's actually, that's really hard because he's definitely like, he represses sometimes. He's definitely a repressor. And he is morality over practicality, because the way he's like willing to go to death over like living by the way. But I don't know. He seems to actually like inductively reach generalization. So I'd almost say he's like, I don't see as much. Maybe I put him in the middle here.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing is, like, even with so I put him, so that for the first two branches here, I put him here, but then here maybe in the middle, like the third one. But then here it's like, the thing is, like, the things he do a lot of them end up working in practice. And he does seem to think about what works in practice too. So I don't know if it's fully, maybe it is, it's not as easy to, it's more mixed, but definitely there's more mind side than body side. Because there's all this stuff about discipline, which I think is in the Japanese culture. And, discipline is a kind of aesthetic discipline. So.
Well, I would definitely emphasize not morality over practicality, just a duty over practicality might be a better way to think of it.
Yeah, maybe duty, or like, I guess morality. Idealism is a good word too.
Yeah.
One thing that I thought about is, like, I've often heard of idealists being emotional and like driven by emotion, so which is strange.
Yeah, idealism in terms of the more technical term within philosophy, like Kant is considered, his brand is like German idealism. It's just the way you think about like concepts are like primary, something like
Oh,
that.
okay. But then there's different meanings, right? Because there's idealism in art or something. So you can.
Yeah, it would be a different context, but within the field of philosophy, within the tradition, like Kant is considered that just normally. It's not even a unique subjectivism. Like he's called an idealist.
On a like associative basis, so not with understanding, but just simply by association. Whenever I hear idealist, when someone says, oh, I'm an idealist, I do tend to think emotional, passionate, by association. So I don't know how that relates to
Yeah,
this.
science idealism be like, I don't care what the effects are on reality. This is the right thing, and I'll do it no matter what.
Yes.
That could be idealism. And like, wait, don't you care about if you die or not? Don't you care about what happens in reality? Don't you care what happens to you? It's not like it was it really even moral if you just end up if it just destroys anything anyway as you do it. Like, what's the point?
But that's why I think emotionalist when I think that, which is
Yeah, in a
the
way.
opposite.
So emotions where it gets really weird. I think the emotion part where it gets really messy to use these two things. But
Okay. Anyway, that is cool. Let's see what else I got here. Yeah, all right. I guess I'll become more familiar with that later as I work through this. Oh, this I don't know yet, which is we've established that, like, it becomes obvious later. Like, I'm curious about this filter, that because he's talking about they accept it sincerely, but they accept objectivism or philosophy or whatever it is they're studying, but they do so through the filter of the mind body issue. I'm like, how does that even work? But you said it would be
I mean,
examples
like,
later.
imagine like I had to follow objectives because it's my duty as a living being. I have to do this because I must.
Yeah, in that case, I'm definitely on the pragmatic side, because I'm like, well, if they say don't steal, but I'm not going to get caught downloading music, then why should I listen if it's supposed to be for my life? This philosophy. So
Yes.
I'm definitely more on this
Yeah.
side. Oh, in that way though, it's strange because I'm definitely split now that we're talking about like duty and that, and then but yeah, I guess you can be a combination. You can be like the relationship between them isn't as clear cut. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I've recognized I'm more on the body side too. The way I'm skeptical about things. And
Yeah,
Peikoff says, I think he says like most objectivists are on the mind side.
yeah.
But So yeah, most are on the left, but I'm definitely on the right. But it's a matter of understanding your own.
You're on the right, you say.
Yeah, the body side.
You're on the
But
body side.
yeah,
I
but
thought you said you're on the mind
sometimes
side at the start. But okay, cool. Body
no, I
side.
didn't mean, I misspoke then if I did.
Okay.
But maybe at times I would be an idealist, I'm sure. Like,
Yeah.
oh, it's just the right thing. I gotta do it. It's ideal. Like, I doesn't matter what happens in reality. It's I gotta do the right thing. But still
Well,
mostly on the body side.
I think I'm probably, yeah, it's strange because when you think of it, there's different examples I could give where I'd say, oh, maybe I'm a bit more here. And then others, when it comes to like downloading stuff, I might be more on this side, you know? So it's
Yeah.
not, it's pretty hard to, but anyway, okay, I sort of see what you mean by that filter. Like, I must do this, approach it that way.
Like, I want to be a
Um,
revolutionary that changes the world. The consequences be damned. Even if the
right.
heavens may fall, I will do this.
Which
That's
sounds
something
emotional to me.
yeah, something Kant said once, like do justice though the heavens may fall. Like, you should do the right thing no matter what, even if heaven falls down on top of you. But he didn't say that word for word, but something to that effect. Like, though the heavens may fall.
Let me find a quote for you by, I'm going to find you a quote if I can, which relates to exactly what you've just said. Um, there we go. I found it. This is interesting because it relates to a lot of what we've spoken about what is it, metaphysical view of man, sense of life, and then this.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, so this is from the Satanic Verses. I'm going to just paste it in above this question. So the pragmatist, the idealist, and then he's got like a view that you will be smashed to bits, but 1 in 99 times you won't be. So what you could say that's like a tragic view of life, right? In sense of life terms.
Maybe.
Yeah, anyway, thoughts on that as it relates to, it's pretty cool. You can tie it up to, it's like,
Yeah,
that would
it's
be
related.
you're the first part, you're a repressor, idealist, who believes in concepts over practicality, and in the, the second part you are, and then this part here, the compromise does deals, is the pragmatist who goes with concretes over
Concepts.
concepts. Yeah, it's pretty cool
Yeah.
that that captures it.
Yeah, it does. That's the idea.
Yeah. And what about sense? Like, obviously, without context, we don't know enough about. I haven't read him, but it
Way
makes me
too
want to
little
read it.
context.
Yeah, exactly. But it is kind of like that tragic to me. I've been trying to interpret. Let's see. I'll find you another quote and I'll tell you. I've been
That's from the
thinking about.
book that he wrote that was a fatwa was put out against him.
That's what he wrote in the book when the FUT was put out. Okay, I didn't know.
I don't know anything else about it though.
Me neither. All right, let me find. This one. This is Jack London, who I love.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what it's done with that formatting there, but anyway, whatever. We can read it like this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I like that.
I tend to think he's also got a tragic. He's like got a, what's it called, like a positive view of man, if I'm trying to conceptualize it. and man's potential, and like life should be an adventure, but he's also got a tragic view of life.
Yeah, from what I know of him, yeah, I agree. I've read some by him, but
Oh,
he's a
you
great
have?
writer. I only read White Fang and Call of the Wild.
There's another quote I want to find you in terms of like, but can you read in like, if I'm to read into this, the way I read it is that it's like you either blow up and die because you get killed by something, or you just dry rot. And so it's a view
Yes.
implicit in that is this kind of view of the world where nature is against you and you have to fight it and survive. And like
Yes.
maybe I'm importing some knowledge because I love a lot of his books, but isn't that a bit of like, if I had to categorize the sense of life, it would be kind of tragic in some way, but still positive?
Yeah, that sounds about accurate. Very Dionysian, if to use that word again.
Why? What's Dionysian about it?
Like passionate about these feelings, about this intuition, just living without trying to analyze it so much, just go out and live it, that kind of thing. Just more about the pathos than ethos. Like pathos being just like that impulse to act and be, ethos being what you would say explicitly, like I'm going to set out and live these principles that God has
Oh, and
set for me.
pathos. Oh, and that's this split between Apollo and Dionysus then. So Apollo
Yes.
is the ethos, which is the mind,
The mind.
idealism,
Yes.
and
And
then
Dionysus is the
ah,
body.
wow,
But
cool. So what is
Nietzsche's
are
idea.
they myths? What are they? This Apollo and
Well,
Dionysus?
Nietzsche came up with the idea based on the Greek gods as a way to talk about Greek drama and tragedy.
Okay. Okay.
And
Oh, right.
Apollo being the god of light and reason, Dionysus being the god of like of drinking and beer and wine and pleasure.
Do you think that we're talking about studying art before, like obviously I'm trying to work on things that improve thinking first, but is there anything practical in the art? Like not, I don't mean like it'll make me a better thinker, but if it's true that if there's some truth to the theory that the art embodies abstractions and they help guide your actions and thinking in that way because they let you hold abstraction in mind, to me that does seem practical. So is
Yeah.
there value in art in the sense of like practical application as well to life in studying Nietzsche's like theory of art and that kind of thing?
Theory of art's harder to say, but the art itself for sure. Like I think the pragmatic side just naturally comes with it. Like you don't even need to plan ahead. It's just like whatever you read, and if you enjoy it, it's gonna help you in some way or another. If you like it, it's gonna help you. It's hard to predict how, but it usually does. So as far as the theory, it's harder to say, but if it helps you take notice of the conceptual value, then I think it's good. Like I think reading a few things by Aristotle and Nietzsche are enough usually to get a good sense of at least ability to think about art in some relevant way. Like Poetics is pretty short, for example, by Aristotle. It doesn't take long to read. And it can give you a good sense of how art might be more relevant or what way art applies to your life.
Okay, so it applies to life. So it does have application. I guess it would still be a ladder issue. I'm trying to find you one more quote before I go. Let me just stop this recording as well.